Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us in our COVID-19 webinar series. Today, we're covering federal and state government funding and business opportunities. We've got a great panel that's going to answer some questions for you about contracting and funding. And let's move on to our next slide here. So just a quick blurb about us. I am Jennifer Schaus, and we're coming to you live from Washington, D.C. Our firm provides professional services for federal contractors, ranging from 8A certification to GSA schedules, proposal writing, and back office compliance. Contact information is here on this slide. You can learn more about our services and our webinars on our website. We do have some links here to various government websites, which should be helpful to you. We've got the SBA disaster loan link, as well as the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program. I'm sure we'll touch on these two items, which have been in the news, I think, starting yesterday in regards to funding. We've got the Defense Production Act, the FISA site, GSA. They've made some changes as far as products that they are allowing on the schedule that in the past were prohibited in regards to Buy America and Trade Agreement Acts. We've got the Department of Labor OSHA site here, which will give the HR folks some information that they need. More on DOD and their response. And then the OMB memo, which is referenced many times in our previous webinars and just in general information coming out from the federal government. Okay, so today's webinar is being recorded. The way it's going to run is we're going to kick off with speaker introductions. They're going to then give you some insight on what they think about what's currently happening as far as what I call COVID contracting, but even more specifically regarding federal, state, and local funding and business opportunities. We'll then dig into the questions. We've got about 22 questions, one speaker for each question, and then we'll wrap up. Their contact information, the speaker's contact information is provided in the beginning. It will also be provided on the final slide of today. So from Public Affairs, we've got John Arley. He's with Hush Blackwell Strategies. John, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to turn the floor over to you to share your thoughts and insight.
Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to be with you this afternoon. Just want to give you a quick overview. A lot of this is stuff that you probably have either heard or know about, but set the framework for some of the questions that we hope to get to later on in the presentation. As you all know, Congress has enacted about 3 major COVID-19 response bills, at least as of yesterday, totaling $2.3 trillion in funding. However, in a small little glimmer of good news, CBO recently, I think it was late yesterday, early afternoon, rescored the funding at $1.8 trillion. So there you go. We saved a little bit of money in a couple of days. This obviously is going to be a drop in the bucket compared to the next couple of packages that are coming out. But what a lot of people don't know is that Congress is struggling right now with 150 or so other pieces of legislation that are related to the crisis. They deal from everything from schools to additional funding, to emergency management, and so forth. And right now, the next step for Congress on the COVID-19 struggle is going to be this, what we might be hearing as a 3.5 bill and a 4.0 bill. And frankly, the waters are a bit muddy on where we're going to go with this. A week ago, or about a week after the big bill was passed, House Democrats announced, for instance, that they wanted to include $760 billion in infrastructure packages as part of the next response bill. But soon after that announcement, the chairwoman of the House Financial Services Committee, Mrs. Waters, released an outline that didn't even mention infrastructure package, meaning that I think the leadership from the Democratic Party was refocused and reshifted on what is now being called a CARES 2.0 bill. In that bill, the focus will be more on investing in some of the resources and the programs that were already authorized in the first CARE package, and making some policy modifications to fix things that were problematic. And while there's no set time frame for this Phase 4 bill, House Democrats are working with Republicans to try to pass an emergency interim package, which is known as that 3.5 bill, to fund the PPP program again and to refund some other packages we'll talk about later. But the bottom line is the big stimulus, the next big stimulus will probably be on someone's radar screen by the end of this month, early into May, they have already implemented a new process for proxy voting in the House. So everything indicates that they will try to get back to some sort of order to move forward with the next round of funding early in May. And with that, we'll wait to questions to get into some more detail.
Great. Thank you, John. And from the procurement sector, we've got Jerry McGinn. Welcome back, Jerry, to our program, and thanks for joining us, and I'll give the floor over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so I run I'm executive director of the Center for Government Contracting, which is in the School of Business at George Mason. And I came to George Mason from the Department of Defense, where I oversaw this obscure thing called the Defense Production Act, which prior to this, no one had ever heard of. So I've been very involved. Our center has been involved in kind of decoding the DPA for businesses and government alike, as well as tracking the contract obligations for COVID response across the U.S. government. So what I'd like to say for this session is focus on funding and business opportunities. And I thought my predecessor colleague did a great job talking about some of the state of play on funding. What I want to touch on is some of the opportunities. The opportunities are rapidly emerging every day. They range from, standard requests for, personalized protective equipment, PPE, medical equipment, and viral research to address immediate response to longer term or kind of more prospective efforts such as prototyping or other efforts to increase production or strengthen the public health supply chain and industrial base. Most of these opportunities are coming out of HHS, FEMA, the VA, and Department of Defense, and most are listed on the sam.beta.gov, the successor to FedBizOps. Some additional opportunities that's not the only place to go, because there are federal grants and there are OT, other transactions authority consortia that are not necessarily listed on sam.beta.gov, and they are doing opportunities. For instance, Department of Commerce just issued a funding opportunity for rapid, high-impact projects to the network of advanced manufacturing institutes. And these are public-private partnerships in areas of 3D printing, biofabrication, and textiles. And these efforts are focused on medical or non-medical countermeasures, accelerating the production of critical materials, and other COVID-19 related areas. Another effort, the Medical Technology Enterprise Consortium, which is an OTA, is a group of biomedical technology companies and not-for-profits that collaborate with the Army. They have a series of quick-turn solicitations out on the street. So these and other efforts to bring forward non-traditional solutions will help build industrial capacity, support the current response, but also inform future planning. So with that beginning, I'll turn it back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Jerry. Great insight. And from the business development side of the house, we've got Mark Hogan, CEO over at Government Sales Specialist. Mark, thanks for joining us, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here, and an honor to be here with the other panelists who you guys will rapidly figure out are probably smarter than I am. I'm just a sales guy. I've been selling to the government for the past 30-some years, started and ran a lot of large software companies, government groups such as Oracle and BEA. And I think the unique perspective that I can look at, since I have such history here, is you hate to sound mercenary, but when there's a crisis like we're experiencing right now with this rapidly evolving virus, is the government spends money, a ton of money, on not only helping mitigate the crisis, whatever it is, be it financial, be it health in this case, but to also help prop up the economy. And if I look back over my career and some of the biggest successes I had, a lot of them were tied to crisis. So back in the Oracle days, and this is in the mid 80s, it was the Black Tuesday financial kind of depression back then. Oracle just exploded in the early days. My last job before I started this company 17 years ago at BEA, I'd like to tell people it was my dashing good looks and brilliant leadership that made BEA such a large company. Went from really zero to hundreds of millions, the federal group anyway, in less than 3 years. But it was the same time. It was the dot-com implosion. It was the 9/11 tragedy, and the government spends a ton of money. So from a perfectly mercenary perspective, I mean, the opportunities out there are almost endless. some case studies. We in our regular pipeline, we had several deals that we were thinking would close by the end of the fiscal year. One of them, the order is expected in a few minutes here, was a 7-figure deal forecasted to close in August, and we'll get it today because they've just moved everything's forward. The procurement regulations are being, I don't want to say relaxed, but certainly streamlined. Things are moving much, much faster. They accepted a sole source justification really easily with that. We have an 8-figure deal that was scheduled to close next fiscal year that actually is going to close in the next 2 weeks. And it's just it's dizzying how fast it's going, and the opportunities are far and wide. Literally anything that you build, anything that you think that the government could use, whether it's services or intelligence or whatever, they're buying it right now. I was on a conference call with AFWorks, which is I think it was just kind of the incubator for the Air Force, and they were emphasizing, I must have heard it 10 times, anything you're doing right now, send it to us. We may be able to use it, and I can't emphasize that enough. So good time to be selling to the government. Actually, any time is good to be selling to the government, but these are especially special times. Thanks, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Mark. And our friends over at Deepwater Point, we've got Mike Mullen, who's the small business growth expert. Mike, thank you so much for joining us. I know you had a busy day of webinars today, so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thanks,
Mike,
Jennifer. Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I appreciate the opportunity. Just from a Deepwater Point perspective, we hit the business development, strategic growth side of things for companies where we're bringing you agency knowledge experts, where we have 200 or so subject matter experts that are former federal government executives who help really formulate positioning strategy for companies throughout the federal marketplace. You know, from our perspective, I wanted to share some insight from what we're seeing, similar to Mark's comments. You know, government's still open. Government's still moving forward with things. While in the early March timeframe, everyone was starting to adjust with stay-at-home orders, getting used to teleworking. Agencies were dusting off their teleworking manuals. They had to see if they worked. They started doing that in a slow roll process that then started going into a much wider use process. And then industry had to figure out, okay, if government's not going to be in their offices anymore, how do we continue to work with them? Well, as we know, email and other virtual methods are up and running and working well. And so while the first couple of weeks might have been a little chaotic to begin with, what we're noticing is that agencies and companies are in pretty full stride right now in terms of how they're continuing to work through this challenge. So my comment here is really that while there's a lot of activity around COVID, there's still a lot of normal activity going on within government procurement at the same time. And I would stress that while we may want to look for opportunity around COVID, I wouldn't take your eye off the ball of everything else you already have in your growth plans for the federal marketplace. Just in terms of that general opening statement of business is operating, I would say in a new normal right now, but it is still operating. We're still seeing RFPs being planned. We're seeing RFIs being released, et cetera, and so forth. So I would keep your eye on your ball on your regular plan, looking for those opportunities in response to this. One gentleman mentioned the MTech organization, which is an OTA consortium that really focuses on Army has a medical research laboratory, and MTech does a lot of work for them. They have started putting out several calls for OTA responses, RPPs that they'll be looking for. One in particular is for telehealth, telemedicine. They're looking for companies who have clinical-ready telehealth solutions that could be used to support all of the field hospitals that are being planned. Today, Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, and HHS are planning out the building of about 750 field hospitals around the country. Whether all 750 will get built is yet to be determined, but they're at least in the planning stages, and part of the planning stages will also be how they field technology. FCC just released $200 million fund to ensure that all these field hospitals also have broadband capability brought to them. So there are opportunities that are spiking around COVID. And while if you have a match to that, absolutely look at those opportunities. But I wouldn't quickly design a strategy if that wasn't your business to begin with. If it wasn't your business to begin with, I'd make sure that you continue doing the day-to-day work that you're doing. You might have to do things a little bit differently. Getting access to people may not be as easy as it once was. You're not going to be able to see them at the conferences. You won't be able to hear them speaking on certain circuits, et cetera, and so forth. So looking at strategies as to how do you still meet and become familiar with agencies' needs, how they become familiar with your capability. You need to leverage some additional strategies to make that happen. While you can contact people via email, if you have their cell phone, that would be that much more helpful. If you knew how to place a white paper to them in a strong fashion, that'd be another great way to do it. And we're noticing that with this situation, people are actually a little bit more responsive to some of those types of reach outs as well. So I'll yield with that last comment.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, everybody. So now we're going to dig into the questions. We've got about 22 questions to get through, and we're going to start with first question that came in, which is, with social distancing and self-isolation in full swing, what changes are happening with business development, obviously in regards to federal contracting? So Mike, over to you for this one.
Yeah, so really, based on my last comment that I was making and looking for those other strategies, you have to know how to get in contact with the people that you're supposed to get in contact with. If you don't know who to get in contact with, you're going to need to leverage individuals that do. And I don't want to shameless plug, that's what we do. But leveraging some form of consultant who has a relationship inside an organization, who can help you with first an understanding, second a message of how do you, how does what you have to offer help meet the challenge that organization is trying to solve, and then what would be the unique method of accessing that. We have clients that are producing videos right now, 2 to 3 minute videos with a very pointed message to go in. We have other clients that are putting together unique graphically oriented placemats. It's just sort of this one-page overview of a concept, something that's very hard-hitting in a current challenge that the government's trying to overcome. I will caveat, many of my clients are in the technology space, so these are folks taking some kind of emerging technology and or process-driven mechanism to speed software development or enhance some other element of the business. But leveraging those types of tools that you can then send in, allow someone to see something in a visual capacity, get a good feeling in a 2-3 minute mode is a great way to help pique their interest and then keep the follow-up going after that via whether it's phone calls, emails, or other mechanisms. But we're also finding webinars like this, virtual meetings. In my experience, prior to COVID, turning on the camera on the video conference, I almost never did. And now with this crisis, I find I have the hunger of turning on the camera. And it's actually helping with the connection of the person that I'm talking to, whether it's one person, even with my daughter, I'm like, hey, let's FaceTime each other instead of just phone calling each other. Having that visual connection does help create the relationship, and you can build rapport still via this virtual method. So I would encourage you to continue to leverage those capabilities.
Okay, great. And our second question, what major additional funding initiatives do you anticipate in the next COVID-19 package? John?
Yeah, thanks. It's an interesting question because I think that we are, as I mentioned in my opening comments, we're still trying to figure out exactly where Congress will wind up going and how that will impact the people on the phone call in various and different ways. And I think that what we're going to see in the next package, and that, by the way, does not mean that we won't see a phase 5 or a phase 6 package, which may actually have different opportunities available to folks on the phone. But in the next package, I think we're going to see an increase in the replenishment of the accounts that were already successful. For instance, the small business programs that ran out of funding this week. There'll probably be some extensions of authorities like unemployment insurance, which will shore up businesses and individuals. Some restructuring of some of the types of technical corrections that need to be made to the bill to make sure that they function the way Congress anticipated. And then beyond that is where the real questions lie. And I think some of the things that have been on the table around conversations I've had with Hill staff and with members of Congress really do focus on things like that transportation infrastructure package. I think somebody just mentioned additional research and money for hospitals. That will be a really big part of this. But they're talking about things like direct payments to individuals, broader paid leave packages, hazard pay, worker protection standards. We saw some of that come out in the last few days as far as the conversation goes. But there'll be some real significant changes on the tax code, again, to help deal with the crisis, including payroll tax cuts, possible SALT deduction cap repeals, and a provision that has been bubbling up right now, and this may impact some folks on the phone, that deal with surprise medical bills for individuals and how we either deal with or not deal with those issues. But I think infrastructure, multi-employer pensions, mandatory funding for some park projects, and the monies, the more direct payments to individuals will really be the focus in the funding packages. I don't know that we'll see anything different from that kind of a deal until we get to the phase 5 package.
Can I add on to that, Jennifer?
Absolutely, please.
Again. Yeah, that all, John, sounds very like a good comprehensive summary. The only thing I probably would think that might be additionally added is this. There was $1 billion put in the DPA fund, the Defense Production Act fund, and the CARES Act, and that's going to infrastructure to help rebuild some supply chain capability, frankly focused on the medical supply chain that is currently in China, for pharmaceutical development and production, and not development but production, as well as PPE production. I wouldn't be surprised to see that number, to see that fund get another big push. And to other kind of, again, building industrial capacity. It's not a Buy America effort, but an area to build manufacturing capability. So I would expect to see more funds going there.
Yeah, and this is John again. I'll just add on, and absolutely, and that's part of the hospital package I think that we'll see come out of this, that the hospital issue and hospital funding will be a key component to the next package. And I think that will be to the tune of $100 to $150 billion. I think that's part of the details that they're starting to, discuss and deal with. But of course, we're still focused on the interim funding right now. But I think that will definitely be part of it. We may even see that happen during the interim funding piece. There's a big push right now to make sure this piece that comes out of Congress as early as potentially Monday that will refund the PPP program would also have a huge component for hospitals and another component for state and local governments.
Okay. Super. Thanks, gentlemen. I will move on to our next slide. Bear with me here. Okay, number 3, what is the $1 billion appropriated in the CARES Act for the Defense Production Act targeted for? Jerry?
Yeah, I basically answered that question, I think. So the Defense Production Act, which you've heard about in the press a lot, it has a bunch of different titles, 3 specific titles. The one we've been talking about mostly is Title I, which allows you to rate contracts, the government to rate contracts, to prioritize them, or to direct the means of production. That is, essentially to like the president did with GMs to say, you're going to build this and so on. The Title III of DPA actually is funds for building industrial capacity, and that's done through grants, purchases, purchase commitments, or loans. And the $1 billion was the largest appropriation ever for the DPA fund, which traditionally goes to do things like there's a current project right now to rebuild the rare earth production capacity and magnet production capacity in the United States because of over-reliance on Chinese sourcing. So similarly, the funding for DPA for the fund that you're starting to see some of that come out. There was a $133 million award for building mass production in the U.S. And you're going to see a lot of that in the coming weeks as they're building, trying to rebuild some of the domestic industrial supply chain. This is not going to happen in a week. It's going to happen over the next. It's sort of an interim kind of help to build that capacity. It's going to unfold over the next few months, but the goal will be to help build some resilience in our supply chain and industrial base.
Great, thank you. Number 4, how did the proposals for additional COVID-19 funding from the Democrats and the Republicans differ? And the second part of the question, where are there opportunities for economic stimulus that we should be aware of? John?
Great. The two packages are pretty much, and I think we're seeing that in the day-to-day debate going on right now, and the fact that the Republicans have tried for a couple of weeks now to refund, or a couple of efforts to refund the PPP. There's this huge philosophical divide about where triage starts and ends and where we move into recovery. And with respect to the packages that we see, the Republican packages that have come out have simply focused on tweaking or refunding the existing packages in the CARES Act. And I think the packages that have been proffered up by the Democratic side really focus and deal with people and deal with the resources directly to people, whether those be direct payments, increases in unemployment insurance, and so forth. So this back and forth between the two will be the battle that we'll see through the end of April and well into the early part of May. I think at the end of the day, that the final next package should be visible for all of us to see, starting as early as, I would say, the second week in May. And I suspect that they'll try to get this all taken care of before middle of May to get this next package out. At least that's where we're going with it. And I think the next big opportunities for economic stimulus that come out of those packages, to the second part of the question, are going to be dealt with more specifically in the areas of hospitals, community health centers, health systems, and health workers, with a big focus on anybody who deals with those from the front line on the crisis, and the transportation industry. The Trump administration has really been pushing for an advance, if you will, on the economic stimulus side of things, moving towards what I would call maybe more that recovery economic stimulus part of this, versus the triage phase that we've been currently dealing with. So I think that focus will be where we'll see some of those economic opportunities. The economic stimulus for opportunities will be healthcare, transportation, hospitals.
Super, thank you. And next question, how are the changes in the ways companies and government agencies operate during this COVID-19 environment, as well as the opportunities emerging from the CARES Act, going to impact regular procurement opportunities? Jerry?
Yeah, great. I think it's having a couple of impacts. One is obvious, everything is moving kind of virtual. So you're seeing a lot of industry days being pushed or being rescheduled as virtual events. So you're seeing a lot, but it sort of depends on the different kind of. In some cases, like the Navy is aggressively trying to pull forward opportunities, as one of the gentlemen talked about his opening remarks. There's actually contracts being accelerated because they're just trying to get stuff on contract. So it really depends quite a bit, but I think existing customers or existing opportunities are going to be more likely to get pulled forward, but new stuff that is non-COVID may get may get delayed a bit.
Okay, great.
Jennifer,
Thank
can I
you.
add to that? Oh, I'm up next
Sure.
anyway.
Yep.
Just
go
quickly,
ahead. You can
I-
add to this one.
yeah, it's just to reinforce that. Yeah, the deals I referenced earlier, this one 7-figure deal that we get today was in procurement, and there is a sense that my team got that they just wanted to kind of clear it off the plates since it was so close to, and then just get it done. And the other exercise that I had my guys do was for our clients. We got together with everyone and we came up with a COVID spin. Right, there's virtually everything you're doing, and I hear you probably make it somewhat COVID related, and that's to help what was just mentioned. Right, let's the COVID stuff's going to be in the front. If it's the new procurement and you don't have anything to do with COVID, it's going to take longer. So I think that John hit that. Jerry hit that well.
Okay, great. And Mark, we'll stick with you for this one. I keep hearing on the news that the government needs products and innovative ideas, but they don't say anything about how to contact them or what they'll pay. Any guidance? Mark?
Yeah, so I'm having this. It's just so funny because you watch the news and you get all these government executives up there. We need masks. We need medical equipment. We need supply chain logistics. We need all this stuff, but no one ever says, call this number. And it was funny. I was watching Governor Cuomo on the news the other day, and here's the number, and they actually had some guy's name and his phone number and an email. It is a hard thing, right? I think the government tends to assume that we know how to get to them and reach them, and so it is difficult. I think someone else, it might have been Jerry, had mentioned this earlier, that you've got to be, or Mike actually, you have to be able to reach them somehow. I mean, you can Google names, you can Google agencies. It's a little bit less efficient, but you really have to go about doing that. It's interesting because the government's full of catch-22s. They kind of assume that you know how to reach them, but you don't. You don't get the experience on how to reach them unless you have experience with them. So it's really kind of a challenge. So online stuff, Googling, LinkedIn. I will say that for a lot of agencies, LinkedIn is becoming more and more popular for government employees and a little bit easier to reach them. The success rate really depends on how busy they are and things like that. We also just had a great call with our record engineers. It took us, even though we know them well, we've done a lot of business with them, it took us 2 weeks to get a scheduled call because they're all so busy. So there's got to be a little bit of patience as well. In terms of what they'll pay, because we've been getting a lot of phone calls about that. I'm like, listen, the government has a lot of money. And I think for most companies, and I'm saying most companies, let's say most companies that are less than $1 billion in sales, the deals that the government's paying and what they'll pay are huge compared to what you're used to. I also teach classes at various business schools, Harvard Business School, Smith School of Business, and I tell people that on average the government pays 5 to 10 times what your commercial average transaction is. So they're going to be big deals. There's a little bit of experience and finesse that goes in there, but trust me, the money is pretty rewarding.
Yeah,
John,
if I can add to that,
John.
Nope.
Go ahead, John.
This is Jared, just real quick.
Jerry, I'll just jump in real quick and then I'll let you add on. We did find, and I totally agree with everything Mark just said. We did find a FEMA website that some people have used, and they have used to some good end result. It's go to the regular FEMA.gov website /coronavirus/how to help, and it's kind of hidden in there. It says how to help, meaning that how you can help as a business, but there are links and there are contacts for people as to how they can actually get products that they already produce that can be used in the COVID battle, and how do they sell to the U.S. government. And since FEMA is the lead agency on some of that, that's a good place to start to see if you can find any information from those guys. And I've had a couple of our clients that have had success with that site. Sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to point to a similar. In defense, there's a joint acquisition task force, which I think is embedded. It's basically DoD, FEMA, and HHS. I think they're all jointly working together. So there's on the joint acquisition task force has got a portal that you just put into, and it goes to AFWorks and goes to all the different agencies, and so you just respond to that RFI and get you in the system. So, and I think that was on one of Jennifer's slides at the front end. But that's
Exactly.
There are a couple of portals, and that's going to be, I think, get a little more, a little simpler. The challenge is, as Mark was saying, getting on. These folks are overwhelmed with ideas from people. So they've got to start racking and stacking who they're going to talk to, and it's not going to happen. It's not a just-in-time response. It's going to be when they get to your response kind of stuff.
Right. And I'm going to add a little piece here as well. And if all else fails, on the civilian side, if you're dealing with VA and HHS, then you typically want to reach out to the OSDBUs, which is the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. You want to make sure if you are a new contractor, make sure you're then registered in SAM, that you've got a capabilities statement, that you have the RFP or RFQ that you want to respond to, and these folks can help you. On the defense side, it's the OSBPs, the Office of Small Business Programs. Two offices function the same. Every agency is going to have at least one. We have links to every department and agencies, OSDBU and OSBP, on our website under the resources section. It's available free of cost, and we are putting together, it's going to be something that we're going to sell, state and local government point of contacts and entry point to register to do business in that state. So look for that by the end of next week on our site. And let's keep moving here on to question number 7, which is, now that the SBA Paycheck Protection Program is out of money, what is the likelihood that the fund will be replenished? And John, over to you for this one.
Yeah, sure. And I think we could be quick on this one. I think we've covered a lot of this. The ongoing negotiations that are taking place right now will continue over the weekend. And the fund ran out on money on Thursday morning around 8:45 a.m. when it was announced. But this fund doled out from its inception to the end of its resources in less than 2 weeks. It's a fascinating program. For those of you who don't know about it, check it out on the SBA website. And it's something that doled out over $339 billion for 1.7 million businesses. However, about 700,000 applicants were left in the pipeline. There's a major push by the administration, a major push for Congress. They will come to some agreement on this. I'm very certain of that. The level of it and how they disperse it will be is where the stalling is taking place on both sides. But the replenishment is to the tune of approximately $250 billion, making the whole program a $600 billion program when it's all said and done. And the loans can be used for up to 250% of monthly payroll expenses, which is pretty much forgiven as long as 75% of the loan is used for payroll. So it's an interesting program. I think it's been a lifeline to a lot of small businesses. I can't see Congress not letting this get refunded. So I have every hope that it will be, and as soon as Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, great. And Mike, over to you for this one. Have we seen a slowdown in federal contracting due to COVID-19?
I don't see it as a slowdown. I see some procurements maybe sliding to the right a little bit, but I have not seen a major slowdown in federal procurements at this point. So in my opening comments, I said there is a lot of business as usual. There are agencies that are more pointed towards the COVID response, and I think in those agencies there is a little bit more of an impact. But then there's other agencies that aren't squarely in the face of the COVID response, and that's where you see much more of a business as usual. So we're continuing to see the planning process, the RFIs being released, and the RFPs being released on a daily, weekly basis, and that's why I would encourage the companies not to abandon at all your current efforts, and again, redirect things towards COVID if you have a square peg to fit the square hole. But if you're trying to, create something to go that direction, you may not get enough traction before the COVID spending starts actually backing down a little bit at the same time.
Yeah, let me comment on that, Jennifer. Just one of the things we did in our analysis, we've done a series of reports on the COVID response, and you can find them on our website, which is govcon.gmu.edu. But in that, we looked at obligations over time by month, looking at year-over-year obligations, and the March obligations for this year were, quite a bit higher than Marches in previous years. And it was interesting to watch that because that changed very quickly. The last week of the month, it was about on average. So there was definitely not a slowdown, but then it spiked because of all the COVID response. So you're definitely not seeing a slowdown. I think it would be interesting to look at breaking out the non-COVID contracting obligations over time, which we have not done yet, but we're not seeing a huge slowdown on things at the moment.
Some major programs, just finish the thoughts. CISP4, released their draft, and they're committed to staying on schedule for September release of the RFP. You have a major vehicle, STARS 3, 8A GWAC vehicle. They're on track to continue to release either sometime this summer or early fall timeframe. So some of those major procurements are continuing to move forward. We're seeing inside the agencies, DHS is rich on task orders that are just they have nothing to do with COVID, but they're still releasing their DevSecOps within CIS or CBP, and it's tens of millions to even up to billions of dollars worth of contracts being released all within the next few months. So there is, as I mentioned, a large part of continuing the mission of each of those agencies, and part of continuing that mission means they have to keep the contracting wheels moving. But where contracting resources are limited due to COVID response, then some of those contracting resources are getting shifted over, and that may impact other contracting actions in those agencies. So where FEMA, for instance, may have a slowdown in some of their responses as they shift direction towards COVID responses, Corps of Engineers and parts of HHS, CDC, and other response-oriented organizations.
Okay, great. And Jerry, number 9 for you is, are the business opportunities related to COVID-19 only for companies that traditionally operate in the medical space?
The answer to that is no. There are a lot of RFQs, requests for quotes, that are specifically like on PPE and or for medical research and so on. But I would encourage those that are not in the space to look at the opportunity, because there are a lot of things where they're calling for prototyping ventilators or other kind of deployable medical equipment that that you could apply your company's capabilities to. For instance, I was dealing with a company several weeks ago that is in space, military space business, but they were looking to respond to several prototyping efforts in response to COVID. So there's a lot of opportunity. They're looking for, of course, the well-known kind of GM efforts to, kind of that. So there are definitely a lot of opportunities. It's a sort of, the government's taking all of the above approach to procurement. So I would encourage you. I would try to stay in places where you're going to be competitive, but I think it's open to a lot of non-medical, quote unquote, companies.
Right, and I'm going to add here. I went for a walk last night down on the National Mall, and the National Park Service has signs up for best practices for COVID and social distancing. So companies that make signs, and then we've also got public service announcements. So if you think of the media and production companies, I'm sure you guys have all seen the commercials on TV. So keep some of these kind of non-medical opportunities in mind as well.
Yeah, Jennifer, if I could add that a little bit as well. So I mentioned FCC released $200 million worth of funds, and they now have access to their emergency funding protocols for broadband communication. So the communication side of things is flowing. In order to implement that, there's going to be need to not just provide the carrier service, but there's going to be need to actually do the implementation at the location. So fielding wiring, satellite communications, mobile communications, and other devices like that would be critical. The other thing that I would say is don't just think about it from a response perspective. Think about the long term. The analysis we're going to do on this for the next many, many years to come is going to be a great opportunity for companies that I think specialize in risk management frameworks, companies that specialize in overall business process improvement, in that sort of management consulting, those management consulting capabilities to help figure out, being able to do the hindsight review of this. What went right, what went wrong, how do we avoid that moving forward? And a lot of the expertise that's going to come from other fields, and you're going to need to look for the transferable skills that you did in either a cyberspace or some other critical space. How do you then transfer that over to the medical space? And that might be one or two key hires of folks with a medical background, but you're still going to use similar frameworks that you'd use in those other spaces. So I would watch out for those types of opportunities coming downstream as well.
Great, thanks. We're now at the halfway point, so let's keep on moving. Other than the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, what other tools are being deployed to help financially strapped small and mid-sized businesses? John?
Thank you. So in addition to all the monies that are being just doled out by Congress that we keep hearing about, I think one of the resources that I guess makes us in this country able to really withstand these kinds of challenges to the economic plight that may come around through things like the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, in addition to the PPP and some of the other programs that we've heard about that are more commonplace, have issued trillions of dollars in additional credit lines and other tools that they have at their disposal that really make us somewhat unique. So I would recommend to anybody who's interested to learn more about that to go to the Treasury Department's website. But one I wanted to highlight was the fact that the CARES Act that we did talk about did authorize the Federal Reserve to establish at least one additional big program for the benefit of mid-sized companies. So this, in addition to things like the PPP, would allow some liquidity in the marketplace to keep businesses afloat. The mid-sized business loan program is a new facility set up by the Federal Reserve under the CARES Act to handle and was designed specifically for mid-sized companies that range between 500 employees and 10,000 employees. So the requirements for the loan, the way in which the loan works, now these are not forgivable loans like the PPP, but they do help with the liquidity issues that we deal with. But in addition to that, there are the primary market corporate credit facility, the secondary market corporate credit facility, and several other opportunities that exist outside the scope of the things we hear about in the public sector as to what Congress is doing. So again, you go to the Treasury Department's website for more information on that. And there's even a fund that we'll maybe talk about later on that was specifically designed to help municipalities deal with the oncoming onslaught of crises that they will face with the lack of revenues.
Great, thanks. And Mark, number 11, which agency is in charge of spending money for COVID-related contracting opportunities?
Well, virtually every agency's got some sort of COVID thing. FEMA is really the point on this, Homeland Security in general, but FEMA for PPE type equipment and all that. But I know all the other panelists have mentioned this as well. Corps of Engineers, hugely involved. DOD, those are the Joint Task Force that was mentioned. So there's a ton of them. But I think in terms of if you wanted to focus on something, I would say certainly FEMA. Corps of Engineers, a little bit hard to get. Those guys are busy, but almost every agency has some sort of a COVID response point person, if you would.
Super, thank you. And number 12, how is the funding under the CARES Act distributed? Jerry? Jerry, you might be on mute.
So yeah, the fund. I'm here. Thanks. So there's two big buckets of funding under the CARES Act. One is sort of direct payments or relief that's going to and I think it was John that talked about that in the beginning, sort of direct payments to individuals, to business loans, big business, small business, the PPP program, payments to hospitals, and unemployment coverage. So those are big chunks. And then there was another chunk of supplementals, about $250 billion, which was that's when money went to the VA, to HHS for vaccines and therapeutics, to DOD, to FEMA, and that's where you're seeing, the opportunities develop coming out of that funding.
Okay, moving on to number 13. Will a Phase 4 bill or the 3.5 bill under negotiations include major funding initiatives like those we saw in the CARES Act? John?
Yeah, I think that as we've talked a little bit about, I think that there'll be some new funding under these programs that will be different than what we've seen. But the innovative programs that I saw that we've seen in CARES, the first CARES bill, the Phase 3 bill, I don't know that we'll see anything quite on that level of innovation. I think that we are going to have to see a big focus, and I'm not quite sure how this impacts folks on the call, but there will be a huge dilemma facing small states, smaller cities and localities because of some of the issues that they are addressing. And I think there will be a major funding initiative that will go far beyond whatever you're seeing in the papers right now with Nancy Pelosi and Republicans bucking her on this, but wanting to drop at least $150 billion into state and locals. And I think there's going to have to be some sort of an innovative program that addresses the amazing crisis that will actually hit our state and local governments because they don't function the way the federal government works. They have balanced budgets, they work tight margins, and they do have reserve funds in general. But for instance, under the program that currently exists, $4 billion was allocated under those programs for New York State, and that is preposterous since New York State has been hit the hardest thus far with the most crisis to deal with. The new proposal that we're starting to hear more about that might be in the Phase 4 bill. And potentially as early as a 3.5 bill, actually reapportions monies and reallocates those matrices to allow New York State to get $10 billion out of that program versus the $4 billion. So I think that's where we're going to see the innovation, and that's where we're going to see the major funding. And I think we won't see anything big like those transportation packages we talked about until the next phase after this Phase 4 bill.
Okay, great. Thank you. And 14, Mike, I think this might be your last question. What are the contracting mechanisms the federal government is using for COVID-19 related requirements?
Sure. So, well, as was stated earlier, there are certain relaxations of procurement regulations to help the emergency response. So if something is in direct response to the emergency, they're leveraging all those all the allowances under those relaxed rules. For things that are not as emergency oriented, the government is leveraging things that such as OTAs. We mentioned MTech earlier. There's also the Chemical, Biological, and Weapons of Mass Destruction Consortium that are starting to pull together requirements for government. Some of these will be in response to, as I mentioned earlier, there's a telemedicine effort coming out of MTech right now. We're going to be looking to, they're seeking presentations on field tested, usable clinical solutions that could be used as telemedicine services for field hospitals at this time. So we're going to see more of those types of activities being released, and then I think we'll continue to see additional OTAs, prototype funding, maybe into production-oriented funding on the DoD side that would be used for later response-related needs, but also preparation for future potential pandemics that we need to be response to. So outside of that emergency relaxation of procurement requirements, I see OTAs and then also the GSA's commercial solution opening process being used for these rapid turnaround situations.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we'll move on to number 15. Mark, over to you for this. Will it now take months or years to compete for and win a federal contract?
Yeah, thanks. So it's interesting, over the years of doing this and the classes I teach, people are always stating what I call one of the major misconceptions, that it takes, 18 months to 3 years to get a government contract, which is false without a crisis. But with the crisis, things are accelerating so rapidly. We're seeing deals that are going to happen in weeks and not months, not years. It's going to happen fast if you have the right solution, the right paperwork. And I will say that we're doing some work with FEMA right now, and they're being sticklers for every I being dotted and T being crossed, right? If you do all that and you do it up front, it saves you a lot of time, because the other thing we've learned from a cycle with FEMA, when we submit something, it's about 48 hours to then come back to say, you forgot to cross this T. So to cross the T, you go back. So you have to be smart about it, do everything up front, make sure it's clean as you can get it, and send it in. But right now, and likewise, I said earlier in my opening remarks, during times of crisis like this, things happen really, really rapidly, and it is a teamwork thing between industry and the government, and everyone seems to step up, and that's what we're seeing right now as well.
Super, thank you. And Jerry, over to you for 16. What additional federal funding is under consideration for a potential future stimulus bill?
Yeah, we've kind of pounded this one a lot, so I think John really kind of summarized it well. Yeah, 3.5 and 4 are coming, and then we'll see after that.
Okay, super, thanks. And 17, where do negotiations stand on the 3.5 bill and the Phase 4 bill? John?
Yeah, on the 3.5 bill, I just double checked with a colleague of mine to make sure I had the most accurate information for you guys. And it looks like nothing's going to come out today. They will extend their conversations with Treasury over the weekend. And a source on the Senate side tells me when the Senate comes in for their pro forma session on Monday, we should see some activity on this and possibly punting it over. But between now and Wednesday, the 3.5 deal should be baked, possibly considered by both houses and passed.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mention the 4 bill because that's part of the question there. The 4 bill, that will shift as soon as that's over with. All the parts of what goes into the 4 bill will start in as soon as this process is over. And I don't think we'll see real hard action on that until Congress can reconvene. I think members have gotten tired of allowing the leadership to negotiate these things without members being engaged. So that's why they're making this big push to come back into town in early May. So rank and file members of Congress will have a better say in what winds up in the Phase 4 bill.
Okay, great. And 18, I'm not sure my solution and or services have potential. How do you suggest I position my company? Mark?
Yeah, thanks. So it's been stated, several times, if you can spin it to address anything with healthcare, especially COVID, of course, and how it supports that. And it's interesting, like I said, we went through the exercise with all of our clients, and things like project management. The company that we represent didn't really think they did it, but really everything you look at could be managed by a tool. So everything that you can do that you can say is COVID is important. Does it matter? Like I also said, I was on this call with AFWorks, and they're like, someone actually asked the question, and it was totally unrelated. It was more like coatings for aircraft, because it was an Air Force thing. And they're like, submit it anyway. It doesn't really matter right now. They have money to spend. They could use it. I do think that having something that's COVID related will be faster. But yeah, anything you have or do that you think could possibly help out, then certainly it's either through a grant process or through an RFI or RFQ, or just talking to an agency. Bring it up. It can't hurt.
Great, thank you. And number 19, how can I find the federal funding opportunities to support the COVID-19 response? Jerry?
Yeah, again, it's a subject we've covered quite a bit here. I think a lot of the slides you had at the front end had a lot of that FEMA and the DoD acquisition, the Joint Acquisition Task Force, are starting to centralize kind of different opportunities, but there's lots of different spaces. Some of the consortium, in their challenge efforts, that that are being rolled up in a bunch of different places. So there's a plethora of them.
Great, thank you. And 20, what are state and local governments doing to provide assistance to small businesses impacted by COVID-19? And how do you follow or track day-to-day changes in potential programs? John?
Yeah, this is one of those things that changes by the moment, obviously. And I think the best place I have found resources on this are the governor's websites. Each state has their own program, in addition to what we see at the federal level. And every governor's site has listed out what is being done, particularly in each particular state, as to how to assist small businesses to do the kinds of things that they need to do to stay active and engaged during this crisis. So I'd encourage you to go to the National Governors Association website. There will be a link there to every single governor's website, and there will be a coronavirus action page under each one of those. So depending on where you are and where you're trying to do some work or trying to assist, that's where you'll find that information.
Great, thanks for that resource. And 21, are the funding opportunities focused only on medical equipment and supplies? Jerry?
Yeah, no, as we've said, they're on a bunch of different things. I think you're going to see a lot of opportunities, particularly in the coming weeks, focusing on, again, building resilience in our domestic supply chains. And that's going to, or building surge capability for future preventing or mitigating future pandemics. So that's where I think you're going to see a lot of opportunities, and they're already developing that companies that have either deployable capabilities or things that you can bring to bear those skills for those kind of opportunities. So definitely, broader. And, I think, frankly, companies are one of the things to think about is I can see companies in maybe the national security space start to do M&A, to build some capabilities in these areas. So, which is traditionally had been sort of verboten, because companies would be pure play defense, or the only ones that were a lot of splits were commercial and defense aerospace companies, that suppliers. So I could see companies maybe taking an approach there.
Okay, great. And I believe our last question here is going to be number 22. John, is going to go to you. How will the municipal liquidity facility assist state, counties, and cities impacted by the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, I think this is a good question to wrap up with, because at the end of the day, when we're all trying to do these things and sell to different and various markets, the cities and states are really strapped right now, and they still have to do what they have to do to provide the services they need to do so. The municipal liquidity facility was established as one of those things I mentioned to you by Treasury a couple of weeks ago. Was renounced some of the new funding in this program, and the Treasury is making $35 billion equity investment into the MLF, which is supposed to provide up to $500 billion in direct financing to states and counties and cities. And the reason why this is important is because we know that in the CARES Act, a lot of the money that we've talked about, the $150 billion in the first round and the potential add-on of $150 billion in 3.5 or the 4.0 version, that will go directly to states and local governments. However, there's a cap that says if you have a government of less than 500,000 citizens, you're not eligible for those resources. So unless Congress fixes that, some of the smaller places that still have to address these issues and still have to deal with the crisis don't have any of the resources to do so and are strapped in the process. And so they need PPE. They need all the things that we've talked about. They need, emergency security response things. The EOCs are running out of resources. So when we look at all that, the MLF is really a critical way to get those resources to the locals.
Super, thank you. And special thanks to all of our speakers who shared their time and insight with us today. Appreciate everybody who was able to log on and join us today for the presentation. We will send out the recording and the PowerPoint slides to you. If you do have additional questions, we did not obviously take any live questions, so please feel free to copy the email addresses that you see here. I think we've got a .com missing on Mike Mullins' email address, but everyone else's should be correct. Feel free again to call the speakers or email them with additional questions or help that you may need. So thanks, John, Jerry, Mark, and Mike, and thanks everybody for attending today. We appreciate your time, and I hope everybody stays healthy and has a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great one.